Hello, podcast world, fellow horticulturists, lovers of plants, gardeners, family, and friends. Welcome to Shrubby Buddies, the podcast, friends with woodies for garden goodies. I'm host Matt Guthrie.
And I'm host Tim Fleischer. Coming at you from Central Ohio, Zone 6B. We're just a couple of public horticulturists and certified arborists with experience in education, landscape design, gardening, retail, and wholesale.
So grab a drink, polish your pruners, dust off that kneeling pad, and let's get down to business. Hey, Shrubby Buddies, and welcome to this week's episode of Shrubby Buddy, the podcast. I am Matt Guthrie, joined with Timmy Taterskin Fleischer. How are you, Timmy?
Good, Matt. Great to see you today.
Oh, good, Matt. Good, Matt. So, Tim, Buckeyes
Football.
Ohio State football, Ohio State Buckeyes killed it this weekend. Took care of business. I mean, even though it was Western Michigan Broncos or whatever, they still whooped their ass, and just in every facet of the game.
Yeah, it was really fun to watch.
Unlike our Cleveland Browns, the Poo-Poo Browns just did not do very good.
Yeah, they're currently playing on the TV behind me, and they're getting their asses kicked, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, so Tim and I are Cleveland fans, so yeah, I don't say feel sorry for us, but yeah, it is what it is. So besides that, not a whole lot new going on in our lives. Tim wanted to, so when I spoke on the solo podcast thing, I had spoke about plants in my garden that were doing well through this heat and this drought that we're experiencing here in Ohio. And Tim had something that he wanted to share with you all that's doing well in his garden through this heat and this drought, something that I don't have personally planted, but he has some planted, I think, in full sun and in some dry shade. And Tim,
yeah,
what is this plant that you wanted to share with the listeners?
Back up a little bit.
Whoa, I'm sorry.
When you did the podcast solo, you were solo. I couldn't hear you.
Oh,
I didn't know if you.
Thanks. Hold on. Oh, no. Maybe that was the wrong one. Hold on. Which one am I looking for?
No, that one was fine.
There we go. Okay, go.
So anyways, something that I noticed in my gardens, particularly in my front yard this year, that is just banging during this drought is Japanese anemone. We have two types out front. We've got a double flower white one that gets really tall. That one's in full sun. And then we've got a more compact single flower pink one, and there's some in part sun and then there's some in dry shade, and it's the nicest looking thing in the garden right now. It hasn't crisped up, it hasn't even really wilted, and it's in full bloom.
Yeah, it's anemone season.
It's Japanese, like one of the only things providing any color other than like green or brown right now. So yeah, just another one to add to the list, at least for me.
Japanese anemone, and not just for the fall flower, but I think that those flower buds are pretty sweet too. Ooh. They look like marble sitting on top of the plant. They just kind of like sit there big.
They're gorgeous. They almost look like little orchid buds.
Yeah.
Don't they?
Mm-hmm, they do. So put that one on your list, peeps. The Japanese anemone. So
yes, they can be a little bit aggressive in the garden, but
yeah, they see it around a little bit,
but they're not invasive or anything like that.
Not a hateful aggressive.
No, I kind of like it.
Mm-hmm. All right,
spread your seed.
So we're tree people. We did a talk once on trees, got really good feedback on it. People really enjoyed it, and we enjoyed doing it. We love talking about trees. Like we have said probably several times now, trees were our first love, kind of what got us into plants. So we're going to do another little tree episode here. The title of this one is Xylem Up, Phloem Down, a not-so-scientific look at what make trees special. So we're going to run through a fair amount of stuff on trees today. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on any of these bullet points, but just give you some fun facts about trees and a little bit of knowledge about what makes trees special, and maybe answer the questions that you guys have to some of the things that trees do. So
yeah, trees are unique, and trees are unique compared to the herbaceous perennials that we talk about a lot, and they've got a lot of fun adaptations and a lot of fun little stories we can tell about them. So what we wanted to do was just hit on some points that y'all might find interesting about trees, and hopefully it sparks some questions that you guys might submit to us that we can answer in future podcasts. So
yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So we want to talk about first. We got some bullet points here.
And I'll talk about something first, just assign it to me.
All right, let's talk about primary versus secondary growth in trees. So yeah, you want to give a little rundown on the primary versus secondary growth in trees and kind of explain to our listeners what that is exactly?
Yeah, so trees exhibit primary and secondary growth, which, unlike our herbaceous perennials that only do primary growth, which is that their stems elongate and they grow taller, but they don't get wide woody trunks like we see in the trees. That is the secondary growth part. So every year, trees continue to get wider in their trunk. They actually add wood into their cambium layer, which is the layer that has all the vascular tissue that takes things up and down and throughout the tree.
Bro, I add a lot to my cambium layer every year. Yeah. Oh, dude. So
that's good. I was going to say that too. Yeah, I exhibit a lot of secondary growth.
Yeah,
I have been since college.
Yep. So primary growth was from age 0 to like 30, and now I'm experiencing my secondary growth. I'm not getting taller. I'm just putting on those rings.
Someday you're going to shrink. Height wise. I mean,
yeah.
But yeah, so the trees, they grow, the branches get longer, and those are the apical meristems that bring the branches out longer, and that's the primary growth. But then the girth increases every year, and you end up with, when you think of some stately oaks with these tree trunks that are just massive, right?
Yeah.
Like 6-7 feet in diameter.
Like a big bur oak or something like that. Yeah.
That's the secondary growth that something like a echinacea would not do. Another interesting thing is if you've got a small tree in your yard and you notice there's some branches coming off of it, those branches, as the tree grows tall, they don't grow taller with it. So if a branch sets at about 4 feet up the tree, it's always going to be 4 feet up the tree.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking, should I prune that? It's a little low. It's always going to be at that 4 foot level. The branches don't grow where the branch exits the trunk doesn't go up as the tree grows. So, maybe something that maybe I hadn't thought of before, but
yeah. And I say prune now, prune when those trees are younger, because the younger trees respond so much better to the pruning. So if you wait and you prune it like when it gets older, if you do a good job of pruning it, chances are it's going to heal over. But if you prune a very young tree, the amount of energy that tree is creating, it puts on so much wound, like healing wood, so fast, and it just really seals those pruning cuts over fast. So,
and when Matt says prune now, he means like while the tree is young,
not
necessarily right now, this part of the season. Every species is a little different as far as when you're supposed to prune it, but in general, during the dormant season is the best time to prune, just because there's not as many insects and pathogens flying around.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Yeah.
So that's primary versus secondary growth. Yeah.
I did mention the cambium layer where there's, the veins and arteries of the trees going up and down. That is located just under the bark. That's why peeling bark off of trees or carving your name into trees is terrible for it, because all the wood that's structural and dead is in the center of the trunk.
Correct.
But all the business is happening just below the bark. So
where it's green, like if you scratch the bark with your thumbnail or whatever and it's green, that's all of the cambium layer. So
it might be tempting to peel the platy bark off of a red maple, or to peel the papery skin off of a birch, or to carve into a beech tree. But that is very, very bad for the tree to disrupt the bark.
Yeah, and while we're kind of talking about that, the vascular system of a tree and the cambium layer there, why don't we just touch why don't we touch on the xylem and the phloem, which is all part of the cambium layer, and let the listeners know what it is, what we're speaking of in the title there, because that's
Xylem up, phloem down.
yeah, xylem up, phloem down. So
it's not that simple. It's not just that the xylem goes up and the phloem goes down, but in general, that's what it is. So basically, the xylem are the tubes that bring the water and the nutrients up from the roots to the tree. The phloem are the tubes that once the tree makes its own sugars during photosynthesis and makes its own food, which is unique in plants, they make their own food, the phloem takes those nutrients around the tree to where it needs to be, maybe over to this branch or this cluster of leaves. And then as the season wears on, that phloem will take those nutrients down to the roots where they will be stored for winter while the tree is dormant. So come spring, that tree has a ton of energy built up in the roots to help it leaf out for the spring.
Yeah, so that's super cool that the trees can do that. I'm sure that there's some people listening right now that had no idea that trees were that complex. So much like,
and it's much more complex than we made it sound.
Yeah, that's just the dumbed down
that's just the layman's terms there. And and neither of us are scientists, so
nope.
Take that with a grain of salt.
But we are arborists, so this all goes into that. So cool. So that kind of covers a little bit of that. Let's talk a little bit on roots, kind of the size, root establishment. So with trees, when we plant trees, a lot of times these roots are, if they're ball and burlap trees, they're cut by a spade. A lot of times the roots are cut by a spade when they're digging them out of the ground, or maybe they're girdled roots in a pot, like a 15-gallon pot, and those roots are kind of spinning around in a circular way. What I always recommend doing is definitely breaking those circling roots apart, pulling them out and pruning them off, because you don't want that circular motion to continue to happen. But so when we plant these trees, there's like a establishment period or kind of a recovery period for the trees. So when the tree goes into the ground, even though you might not see growth on the top of the tree, like branches getting longer and a lot of upward growth on it, what you're not seeing is the growth in the roots. So it's putting all of its energy into repairing those roots and trying to get this tree established into its new home. And what we kind of is arborists, there's no real exact amount of time on how long this process of reestablishment is for a tree, but what we kind of do is, on a rule of thumb, would be 1 year for every inch of caliber. So if you have a 1-inch caliper tree that you're planting in the ground, you can figure on about a year for that thing to kind of reestablish itself after you're done planting it, assuming the growing conditions are right for it and everything.
Right.
So,
right. We plant a lot of like 2 to 3 inch trees at work, and that's the thing. Like, you're not going to see a whole lot of growth in the crown of that tree for 2 to 3 years after you plant that. It's putting so much energy into those roots because those roots are so important.
Yeah, and that's why I try and explain to people, like, hey, sometimes a 2 to 3 inch tree, that instant kind of tree that you put in there isn't always the best way to go, because you do have that 2 or 3 year time period before you really start to see much growth on the top end, right? Kind of above the ground.
Yeah, like Tom Petty said, the waiting is the hardest part.
Yeah, absolutely. So
rest in peace, Tom Petty.
R.I.P. So some of these like smaller 15-gallon trees, I could plant a 15-gallon tree next to a 3-inch tree, and by the time that 3-inch tree is starting to put growth on the crown of the tree, the 15-gallon is as big or bigger.
Yeah,
than
it's
the
already
3-inch
surpassed
tree.
it.
And I've spent half as much money on the smaller tree as the big tree. So big isn't always better. I understand that sometimes you want that bigger tree for like an instant screen or something along those lines, but if you can get away with a little bit smaller tree, I always recommend going a little bit smaller. Big isn't always the answer. So
unless you're Taylor,
what?
Big isn't always better.
Correct.
She would beg to differ.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Your wife?
I know who you're speaking of.
Okay.
Yes, I know who you're talking about.
Okay.
But
well,
I don't know which way you're going with
I don't
this.
know
So,
either.
like, I don't know if I should take this as an insult or a compliment.
Just take it.
So,
Just
because
take
we
it.
were talking about, like, secondary growth earlier. And all right, moving along.
Tell me another thing about roots that's interesting as far as, like looking at a mature tree and the size of the roots.
Yeah. So, what's everyone talk about with roots size is the roots go to the edge of the crown of the tree or the drip line of the tree, right? So the roots aren't going to go any wider than the crown, which is totally false. The tree roots go down some, typically not super deep. I mean, there are some that have tap roots that'll go down deep, but typically not really, really deep, but they will go out wide forever.
And they stay pretty close to the surface because they're covering a large surface area and they want to catch every bit of water they can. So the closer they are to the surface, the better the chance that when we get just a little rainfall, that some of that water is going to get to those roots.
Correct. And not all of these roots that are extending, I like to tell people, like, hey, under good conditions, some of these roots could be 3 times the width of the crown.
Mm-hmm.
So if your crown's 100 feet wide, the roots may be 300 feet out. Now, when we talk about roots, we're not talking about these big 3, 4, 5, 6 inch thick roots on these bigger trees. We're talking like the small fibrous roots too, the ones that are actually doing the work for the tree.
The
smaller,
the large roots are structural. They've put on growth to enable to get to the fibrous roots, but those fibrous roots, they're just tiny little things that you can't hardly see. Those are what are doing all the work as far as water and nutrient uptake.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
that's kind of a neat fact about trees with the roots. So don't think that your roots stop at the edge of the crown of your tree. They continue to go on. So,
and while there are some species that do have a bigger taproot than other, I think another misconception is that just these big plants must have these big long roots that go straight down into the ground, and that's just not true.
Yeah, absolutely not.
It's rarely true.
Especially in evergreens. You see some of these old mature evergreens that get uprooted, and I mean, you're talking like a mature evergreen that maybe get blown over in a storm, especially if it's in a loose soiled area. You look at the root ball on
just
these things.
a few inch mat that just kind of
it's like
pulls
6
up.
inches underground, but it's really wide. So really interesting roots. Yeah. So
roots are super important. We can't stress that enough as far as when your tree gets established and for the life of the tree. A healthy root does so much for the health of the top of the tree, the part that you see. So.
And we'll do an episode sometime just on that, on proper tree planting technique and stuff, because I think that that's really important, and it's something that so many people are doing wrong when they're planting trees, and so much that goes into the tree planting is 100% like root, like for the health of the roots. So we'll go into that at some point, but another episode for another day. Moving right along though, Tim, so it's fall. My maple trees have dropped all their leaves. My walnuts have dropped their leaves. The elms, just everything's dropped its leaves. But my oak trees
already.
Well, I mean, like later in the fall. I'm talking maybe last year. They drop all of their leaves, but my oak trees, and like I noticed like some of the beech trees and stuff around, they still have their leaves on, even clear on through the wintertime. So what exactly is that called when it does that, and why do they think that might do that?
So the term for what you're describing, Matt, is called marcescence.
Ooh,
I like that.
I do like
marcescence.
That.
It would be
Marcescence.
a good band name, marcescence.
Yeah, marcescence and something like marcescence and
the Willie Knockers.
Yeah, the Willie Knockers sounds like a good indie rock band. So
yeah, the term is marcescence. A tree that behaves that way is a marcescent tree. And you could probably think to the wintertime and think you have all these bare trees, but there's maybe some oaks in your neighborhood where they just have all these nice brown leaves just still hanging on the tree, like every single leaf. That's marcescence. And it's very common in oaks and beeches, especially the younger ones. And while I think there's not any definitive answers on what causes this to happen, I think one of the big theories is that Marcescence is because those young oaks need to protect their buds. So if they keep the leaves hanging over the buds for the growth for next year, it keeps them a little bit insulated.
Yeah, it makes
for
sense.
the winter.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense.
So I'll go with that. And, it's cool. I think it adds like another element to the landscape.
Winter
nice.
interest.
In fact, I know we're talking about trees, but one of my favorite shrubs these days is Oriental Spice Bush. Mm-hmm. And that's one of those ones, and it's super marcescent. It just holds on to these really nice, lovely brown leaves. It's hard to explain the color brown, but it is a lovely brown, and it creates a screen. And
I think it's like to me, it's like an orangey kind of brown.
It's really nice. So it just adds another layer to the landscape. So I have no problem. I know a lot of people do because they want to get all their leaves. They want to get all their leaves up and out of their yard and their flower beds before the winter, which isn't really great practice anyways. So the
humans have like such a goofy obsession with the way things should be done now. But whatever. So we do where we work. We get complaints about that. Like, why are you using all these oak trees? Because all they do is keep blowing leaves in my yard all winter long. And it's like, man, first world problems, right? Yeah,
Jeez,
exactly. Like,
goodness.
Sorry you have beautiful mature oak trees behind your house. Like, darn it. So, cool. Yeah, so marcescence. I also like with the marcescence, something that's interesting because I have a lot of oak in my backyard that holds onto the leaves. And I just love like in the fall and in the wintertime, even like or early in the spring when you go outside and there's a little bit of a wind blowing, it kind of... You hear the rustling of those leaves in the trees, which is a pretty sounds in an otherwise pretty quiet landscape that time of the year. So yeah, that's another element to it, I suppose, would be.
And speaking of sound, some really cool things about trees that we wanted to talk about was just like a whole list of benefits of trees that, there's obvious benefits of trees, right? Like you can go to the park and lay out your blanket and have a picnic in the shade of a tree. That's cool. That's a great benefit.
Absolutely.
Or the fall color is pretty to look at. Or you could tap a sugar maple. I'd tap that, Acer, right?
Yeah.
And get
every damn time.
And get syrup. Yeah. Every time. But there's other benefits that I think are a little bit more hidden that we don't always think about.
Correct.
So, and since you mentioned sound, what's...
Yeah, so some of the benefits of trees, I mean, reduced noise pollution, since we're on the topic of sound. So when the leaves are on the trees, they deaden sound. They deaden that highway traffic and that noise. And you live near the Port Columbus, John Glenn International Airport, whatever they call it now. And so you have that sound, the sound of planes. And I know you have talked to me about how, man, it's like the difference between summer when the leaves are on and winter when the leaves are off. Like, it's pretty crazy, like how much more you can hear the sound of the airplanes taking off and landing.
I'll tell you firsthand, in the wintertime, if I go outside, I can hear that, that whine they make when they're taxiing?
Oh, yeah.
I can hear that so loud, and it doesn't bother me. Windows are shut, I don't hear it then, but when I go outside, I can hear a plane taxiing on a runway from a few miles away. In the summertime, I don't hear that.
Non-existent. Nil.
I can hear those planes taking off and in the summertime, but all those leaves on the tree dampen all that sound, and that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the other benefits too of trees, not just reduce noise pollution, but I mean, we can get into the sequestration of carbon. So the fact that it can take this dirty, the polluted air and take that carbon dioxide and use it to its benefit and then store it in its roots. It's like a carbon tank. And, that's great. Filtering our air. It takes care of stormwater. So we have all these, when we do have rain, it's going to help use some of that water. It's going to help take some of that water up, which is going to help with erosion and flooding and stormwater pollution.
It's a lot like what a wetland or a prairie might do, how it might pull some of these toxins out, and it's like a tree is doing that too.
Correct.
And then just think of a bunch of trees doing that all together.
Yeah, super important. You mentioned the shade, not just for your picnic, but trees around your house are going to lower the heating. Well, more so, that's going to lower the cooling cost. It's going to lower the amount of heat that your house is receiving. And I know at my house, like the difference between the front of my house that doesn't have any large mature trees to the back of my house that's all large mature trees, like the bedrooms from the front to the back is crazy how much cooler it is on the side with the trees. So really important when it comes to your energy, home energy costs. There's also been studies out about decreased crime rates in communities. There's studies by universities where they've done long, like 30-year studies on neighborhoods that have canopy, they have street trees, and then neighborhoods that don't, and the health benefits, especially the heart-related deaths and heart attacks and things like that. Trees, or the neighborhoods with trees, with the street trees and the big, mature canopies, they just didn't have the health problems that the neighborhoods did that didn't have any trees. So
yeah, and there's probably so much that goes into that. It's that the trees are creating a healthier environment physically, but then also just for mental health, which I know is such a big point these days. Just imagine being in a place where it's just concrete, like a parking lot, versus a place where there's trees,
like a forest. Yeah,
it's just what just sounds nicer to sit down and take a deep breath in, right?
Yeah.
And I find the crime thing very interesting. I know we've both sat in on a talk about this, and there's studies out there you can find on the internet, but you'd think, well, maybe crime rates would be up there's a lot of trees because all the crooks can hide.
Yeah.
But that's just the opposite. It's just like the trees just kind of do something to the psyche.
Like a calming presence to them.
Yeah. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Very fascinating, those studies. So if you want to do more research on that, we can probably find the link and put it in our link tree to that study, and might be able to read about that, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, we'd have to look. I want to say that was a study that was put on by Michigan State University in their, I don't know if it was their like forestry program or what exactly, but I do remember that talk, and it was fantastic. It was kind of like fascinating and mind-blowing to think about, what it was that they were talking about. It's just things that you would never even imagine that the trees can provide. So, all right, Tim. So I'm gonna jump back to you on the marcescents when we were talking about trees that holding onto their leaves. And I love going to northern Michigan, where the coming in on this time of the year, mid to late September into October, the fall color is mind blowing. The sugar maples and the oaks and things. So when talking about leaves and their fall color, what is it about the leaves that give them their fall color? I know a lot of people think that it's just the cold, or it's just the shorter period of sun through the day. But like, what is it exactly that's happening there that's giving us these fantastic colors that everybody loves this time of the year?
And those things you mentioned are the drivers. The shorter days and the cooler temperatures drive those trees to start senescing or going into dormancy. But if you think about a tree with its green leaves, the pigment in that tree is chlorophyll. That's what makes them green. As these trees start to go dormant, start to senesce, that chlorophyll is overtaken by other pigments, such as flavonoids, which is a yellow, carotenoids, which is an orange, and anthocyanins, which is a red or a burgundy or a purple. And some of these plants have, different, they might have all of these and some of these, so they can create, for a sweet gum, for instance, can have all of these exhibited at one time.
Damn,
or they can go yellow to orange to burgundy in the span of a week. It's amazing. And then some stay rather stagnant, like a sugar maple is going to be a really nice orange, or a ginkgo is going to be a really nice yellow. So all it basically is these other pigments that are already present overtake the chlorophyll and say, go away, green, get out of here, it's our turn. And they just light that shit up. And it's like one of the big reasons why I love October and November here, because It's the football.
Football season.
It's
so you got Buckeyes and Brownies.
Yep, it's my birthday.
Your birthday.
I 10/2/84. And then
it ain't hot as a mother effer out.
No, I love it. God, it feels so good. It's like my mood is boosted. And then it's the fall color. I just love it.
Yeah, the fall color is fantastic.
Just the scenery just changes so dramatically, and it's lovely. And, you know, I want the rains and I want the storms to come because those are fun, but they'll often spoil a good, fall color. So
yeah,
it's like a double-edged sword.
It's
there.
also the pumpkin spice lattes for you too, isn't it?
Shit. Not for me.
Pour overs only.
That whole pumpkin spice thing is such a sham.
Come on.
Because it's not. All they're doing is like using nutmeg and cinnamon and all these spices that you can get any time of year. Shit doesn't taste like pumpkin. Have you ever taken a bite of a pumpkin?
I have. So
it doesn't taste like pumpkin.
I have been to some coffee shops that do the pumpkin spice lattes, but they use like legit, like real pumpkin in it. So you taste the pumpkin,
right.
But like, I know what you're saying.
It just seems like such a sham to me. But if you like it, hey,
you're also. I mean, I'm not saying this in a bad way.
I know you're going.
You're a coffee snob, dude.
I know.
Like pour overs only, and it's got to be like
the single origin
African. All natural, not washed, blah, blah, blah. People, when I am up in northern Michigan and I go to this coffee roaster called Mundo's, I'm always getting Tim a bag of beans. And
Shout out to Mundo's.
It's like a 15-minute phone conversation to figure out which damn bean I'm supposed to be buying for you. But they've got good ginger snap cookies, so it's definitely worth the FaceTime.
You're butthead.
Anyways, so... Cool. So that's kind of the lowdown, the science on why trees get their fall color that we all love. I don't know anyone in this world that doesn't love the fall color of a tree. So cool. Some other fun facts about trees, some things that I personally think are pretty cool. So pretty much all trees get their water through their roots, not their leaves, right? So a lot of people water their plants like, oh, I'm watering it because I'm getting the leaves. Well, you're not doing shit because it's getting the water through the roots. But one tree that's really one tree that's super interesting is the coastal redwoods. So the giant redwoods that you see like out in Oregon and Washington State, Northern California, these big giant redwood trees. It's not that they're in an area that receives like tons and tons and tons of rain, but what's really neat about these guys is that they're able to also pull their moisture out of the humidity in the air, which is why you find them in coastal areas, because along the coast you have more moisture in the air, and they can pull their water in through a process called transpiration, and that's one way that they're able to water themselves. And it's amazing on some of these giant coastal redwoods just how much water they're able to take in through the course of a day. I mean, crazy amounts of water through one day, just pulling.
You're talking more than a bucket full.
Way more than thousands of gallons of water pulled out of the air, through their needles to help keep those guys alive and doing well. And while we're on the topic of some of these bigger trees that are out west, something else that I think is pretty neat is we all think of forest fires as like a bad thing, right? Because property loss, and the occasional death, by somebody, and maybe the displacement of animals. But
a lot of the forest fires that we have, especially in recent years, are bad because they weren't caused naturally, and they spread, and they were uncontrollable, and they were just devastating. But it is a natural process that happens, that should be happening across the whole United States.
Really, yeah, it should be. I mean, prior to the invention of a fire department and fire trucks and things like that, I mean, that was just more people and in cities and things like that. I mean, that was just the way that it was there was fires that controlled forest growth in our prairies, and it was very important. But what's really interesting is the giant sequoia trees that are typically found just south of the coastal redwoods there. So you're thinking like more central and southern California, you get these giant sequoia trees, and they actually rely on the forest fire in order to grow. So the forest fire does a few things for some of these trees. One, it burns off the understory and the leaf litter and things like that are on the forest floor, which is in return opening up bare soil for these seeds. The seeds need, at the minimum, bare soil to germinate. Two, it's punching a hole in the canopy. So maybe there's dead branches and things like that are kind of cluttering up the canopy. It's punching a hole through there to allow more sunlight to get down to that now bare soil. And then three, that fire is actually opening up the seed cones and allowing those seeds to fall out. Without that fire, those seed cones probably don't do that. So, and there's some tree species, I think the longleaf pine out west relies on the fire to actually almost scarify them. So kind of break down that coating on that seed in order for them to even be able to, to germinate. So, and you had mentioned when we were talking about this, what was the one kind of...
It's the jack pine. Pinus banksiana.
Okay. So that relies on forest fires to...
Yes, it's our eastern species that relies on fire, and it has the cones have a resinous scale and scales all over them, and in order for them to open and release a seed, they do need the high heat of the fire. Yeah. So without that, it would not be able to procreate. Mm-hmm. A stand of jack pine would just shrink and shrink and shrink without some sort of fires at the required intervals.
Yeah,
so.
That's cool. And I don't think that it's by chance that these trees, the sap that they're producing and these oils and things that they're producing are actually flammable, you know, so I think that that's by design probably. So when the forest fires come through that they are able to actually burn. But what's cool is these trees that rely on these fires are also adapted to be able to survive the fires. So most of your forest fires are going to be quick burning fires. They're going to be super hot, but super fast. And there's a term for these plants, and that's pyrophyte or pyrophile plants that rely on these fires, but can, survive them and things. So I think it's really cool. But we have such a negative outlook on forest fires, but they really are important for a lot of different reasons, but for trees, this being one of them. So
yeah, I just wish more of them were being started by a bolt of lightning than a cigarette thrown out of a car during fire season,
or burning a campfire when you shouldn't be, that sort of a thing.
Yeah,
so
follow the rules.
Yeah, follow the rules. Smokey the Bear will tell you when you can and can't start a campfire. So
I heard a story on the radio the other day that they're trying to make Smokey the Bear more hip.
How so, I wonder?
Just because he's like, oh, I'm Smokey the Bear. I'm like old and they're trying to make it more of a hip thing.
Okay.
So, I don't know.
Is he going to drop some slang like the kids do at work? Like, that's cat, brah,
Oh, that Ponderosa pine is bussin', kids.
Bussin'. I'm going to yeet some of this water on that fire to put it out. That kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Oh,
I would assume so.
Okay. Here we are, 2024. Dude, I've had Addie, who's 10, and her friend here, who's 11, this weekend, and the stuff that comes out of their mouth, the slang terms, I'm just like, what is this? Like, I don't even know.
My 2.5-year-old's running around the house going, change my diaper, bro. And I'm just like, Jesus, age.
Yeah. Ay. Were we assholes when we were that age?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We sure were.
All right. Fair enough. So, cool. So, we got a few more little facts we want to share with you guys on trees before we wrap this fun episode up. But, so we hit on some of the fun things about the forest fire and the redwoods and the sequoias and all of that. Another thing that I thought was kind of neat, speaking of trees that are out west, is the Pando aspen clone. So, one of the largest living organisms on Earth is a tree. So it's a grove of aspen, I believe in Colorado. I'm not 100% sure. It's out in the Rockies somewhere. I'm pretty sure it's Colorado though. But there's an estimated 40,000 trees, all from one seed that germinated an estimated 2.6 million years ago. What's unique about these trees and unique about aspens is when you see a mountain that's got this grove of aspens on the side of it, typically that's one tree. So there's like a mother tree, if you will, that puts off roots, and these roots send up shoots or whatever you want to call it, tree spouts, I don't know, and form a tree. And the process continues. So they're all linked. All of these aspen trees are linked underground by the same root system. So I think it's pretty cool that this one seed germinated 2.6 million years ago at the end of our last ice age and created an aspen that is now responsible for 40,000 trees that take up basically the entire side of one mountain. And I think the largest living organism on Earth is what, like some sort of
algae or
like
bacteria.
an algae or bacteria bloom in the ocean or something is the largest. But something that you can see with the naked eye from the seat of your car would be like the Pando aspen clone. So
Very cool.
Google it, look it up if you're headed out west. Maybe check it out if you're in the area.
Like Kyle would
like
say,
to see
that's
it.
badass.
Yeah, that is badass, bro. So cool. So into a few more little science nuggets. You want to hit on some of the sciencey stuff here, Tim? I know, like, you're the little mad tree scientist.
I don't want to go into too much depth about this, but there's two main categories of trees, and that's angiosperms and gymnosperms. The gymnosperms are what you think about when you think of conifers, things that produce cones, like pines, spruces, and even ginkgos fit into this category. They're a non-flowering angiosperm, but a non-flowering gymnosperm. But the angiosperms are the flowering trees that, make up a lot of what we talk about. So maples, oaks, dogwoods, ashes, perodia, you name it, redbuds. More of these broadleaf type plants, they all bloom.
Wait, so all trees have these trees have flowers?
Flowers. So, like, a tree is a flower. Like, it's just a big flower that leaves its branches up all winter long, but it flowers, and then in the flower, then things happen that are very scientific. They become seeds, and that's how they produce their seeds. But it's cool because I'm really into tree flowers, and I love catching a specific tree when it's blooming. Knowing
really
what
are.
time.
You really are, like,
because it's cool. Because most of the season, half the season, you've got this bare tree, right? And then the other half, you've got the leaves, right? And that's all cool. I love it all. But there's this very small segment of time in the season when it blooms. And even though it might not be the biggest bloom, if you get up close to it, you really get in there, it's still pretty showy.
You get up in there?
You get up in there. Like, we know redbuds, right? We've talked about these. The trees just covered in these lavender type blooms, and you can see them from, across the street. But then you think of something like a red maple, you need to get a little bit closer to see these delicate little stringy blooms, and they're gorgeous. Best appreciated up close, but gorgeous nonetheless. Another one like that is perodia. You got to look at it up close.
So when I laugh and joke about Tim being obsessed with flowering trees, perodia is the first one that comes to mind because I could not tell you the number of times. So perodia blooms early.
Yep. February, March.
Yeah, oftentimes end of winter, early spring. The number of times that it's been like, oh, hey guys, let's get in the trunk and go see if the perodias are blooming. And it's like driving around and just looking at nope, not blooming right now.
Looks like those flower buds are about to pop. We'll
and then you
got
Kyle in the back. When are you going to stop and get me a fountain pop? I need a fountain pop and a hot dog.
Oh man, we would if you've ever seen The Office, our place of work would make a really great series like that.
Oh my god,
but
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it's fun though. It's fun nonetheless.
But yeah, tree blooms are really cool. So take the time to look at the trees and enjoy the blooms during the small time that they're there.
Yeah,
absolutely. So,
and the coolest little flower that it's not a tree, but it's a shrub is we've always got to go, and we have to go, and we have to get the 8,000 zoom macro lens out to see the flower of a corylus. But yeah,
Listen, if you've ever seen a witch hazel bloom, imagine shrinking that by about 1,000 times.
Literally.
And that is the female flower of the corylus or hazelnut. It's just, I don't know, it's cool.
It is kind of cool.
You know what? We're gonna
honestly, like,
throw
I
a
always
picture up.
I always tease you about it, but I remember the first, because I had no freaking clue about this thing, but the first time you ever stopped and had me look at it, and I'm like, what do you mean there's a flower right there? Like, I don't see it. And I had to get the macro lens out, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
there it is. Okay. So, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
You kind of need like a little bit of a microscope. Like when I look down, I'm like, man, I could use a magnifying glass for that. It's kind of like the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I got you.
Yep.
Aye. So cool. We're gonna get into on an episode. We're gonna hit on kind of like tree identification and stuff. So we're not gonna get too much into leaf and bud arrangement.
I actually have one more thing I'd like to say.
Okay.
There's a few bullets we're not going to get to today, but I'm going to throw it out there. And no cheating, okay? I want the listeners to message us on Instagram and tell us what tree species, what tree genus, type of tree, supports the most butterflies and moths.
Okay.
And the winner, whoever gets the answer right,
Gets a pencil, an eraser, and a golf ball.
and a sticker.
And a sticker.
So what tree genus is the most important for supporting moths and butterflies?
Yeah, so message us that on Facebook, Instagram, through Buzzsprout, through the link right underneath this that you're watching or listening on. There's a little link that's like, click here to comment or text us, blah, 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 whatever. Click on that, message us. Gmail, shrubbybuddies@gmail.com. But let us know what you think, which tree species supports the most moths and butterflies, and winner gets something cool. So right on, man. So we're gonna leave it at that. We're gonna do another tree episode at some point in the near future on prior to winter. I want to do one on tree identification,
Like winter tree ID?
Winter tree ID, and we can get a little bit into the Mad Buck talk then, and talk a little bit about leaf and bud arrangement on trees. So sweet. So yeah, that kind of wraps up this tree episode. Some fun facts about trees. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please reach out to us with any questions that you have on this stuff. Or if there's something that you want to hear. It's like beating a dead horse. I keep saying, reach out to us with stuff that you want to hear, and of course, nobody reaches out to us. So,
would you reach out? God damn it!
Yeah, please reach out to us and let us know what it is you want to hear. If there's something you're dying to learn about, and we will do our best to accommodate you. We need to get some more special guests on here. We need to have a little bit more fun on here coming into the wintertime. But otherwise, I think that kind of wraps up this tree episode. You got anything else, Timmy?
No, I love you, listeners. Love you very much.
Love you harder +2. I'm Matt.
I'm Tim.
We out.
Bye-bye.